Hello, and welcome to the Book Club Review, the podcast about book clubs and the books that get you talking. Sometimes, just every once in a while, we meet someone who doesn't like the idea of book clubs because everyone has to read the same book. What if, we might say to them, there was a book club with a difference? A book club where you can forget about reading a set text. A book club where everyone brings a book they've loved, loathed, can't put down or can't get into, and shares them. A book club where everyone gets to take away a new read at the end. Listeners, are you intrigued? We met up with Bryony Bishop, founder of Bookshare, who is doing just that, bringing people together to make new discoveries and share a love of reading. But what led her to start this slightly unusual book group?
I'd gone to a few book clubs and we all had to read the same book, and the kind of job that I do, I work in marketing, has a lot of deadlines, a lot of turnarounds. When it came to reading, I didn't really want to have another deadline in my life, and actually I'm very mood driven with my reading. So having to read the same book and then talk about it, I was just like, I just can't commit to that. And I was talking to a friend and I said, I want to start this book club. I came to Margate in 2010. By 2012, I wanted to meet new people. It's a very different Margate to what it is now. And there was nothing. And I was like, right, I'm going to have to start one, but I want to go to a book club that I want to go to. And so I was chatting to a friend and we used to swap books and talk about books. And I was like, I'm just going to do that. And so I put a call out on Twitter and said, is anyone interested? And loads of people were, and it's grown. It's been going for 7 years. We've got 2 sister shares in Deal and Faversham just down the road. And we've shared about 500 books in that time. It's quite incredible.
I imagine that your TBR pile must be absolutely huge for the result of hearing about not just one book, but how many books would you tend to get through in a session then, do you think?
You think that people are going to bring one book, but sometimes they bring 5, 6. Sometimes I've had people bring practically a whole bookshelf or a bookcase. I mean, you're in my flat. You can see there's books everywhere, piles everywhere. Over there is what I call Bookshare Cemetery, which is where the leftover books. So I tend to take those home. I did have a big clear out 3 years ago when I was moving house, and I counted 22 boxes of books that I then passed on to secondhand bookshop and charity shops. But what is great is that sometimes your bookshelves become just the things that you always gravitate towards, or the same authors. With Bookshare, you have such a range that can go from kind of a Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code, right through. We had a non-fiction book all about chopping wood called Norwegian Wood, which sounds really kind of like, but actually loads of people love it. It's all about connecting with nature. So you're being introduced to lots of different things. And so it's really diversifying what you read and what you enjoy.
When people get together, when you have one of these evenings, how does it work?
Everyone turns up and I start off by welcoming everybody. And then one by one, we talk about the books that we've been reading that month. We have a lot of regulars who come, so I tend to choose someone who's come before to start off. It can sound quite ominous and daunting, but actually what I try and do is make it very warm, very friendly. If people don't want to talk, they don't have to. If people haven't got a book but they want to be inspired, that's fine. I'm really about getting more people reading and feeling comfortable about reading. And I'm there to make people feel comfortable and that anything they say is fine. I had quite a bad experience at a book club. The person leading it told me that my opinion wasn't right. Now, no one's opinion is right or wrong, and I have never wanted anyone else to feel like that. And we've had one of our book sharers who's been coming for about 5 years now. He came and it was wonderful because someone at work had given him the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown to read, and he wasn't really into reading, but he loved it, and then went through all of Dan Brown, and he walked into a library, didn't know what to read next, walked into a bookshop, didn't know what to read next. He saw Bee's Bookshare on Twitter and was like, oh, I'll try that. I'll see what people recommend. And he's been coming ever since and loves it because he walked into those places and was like, well, I don't know what to go for next. And he'll read anything. So he won't even read the synopsis on the back. He kind of just takes anything, and he's read so many different kinds of books. And I'm not sure he would have been able to do that in the same way if a group of people hadn't just been sitting there over a cup of coffee or tea and a bit of cake talking about the books that they've loved or loathed that month.
It sounds quite empowering then. It sounds like in one sense you've got people coming who are real readers and just bursting with things that they want to share, but then maybe other people who want to learn or want to explore.
Definitely. I've had people that don't read much at all, and I'm very keen that people say, oh, but I don't read very much. I only read on... That's fine. You do read. You might read a blog post. You might read the news. You might read a graphic novel, you might read a magazine, you might read a short book, a long book, short stories. It doesn't really matter, you're reading. That is my aim with Bookshare, to kind of democratise reading so it's not seen as quite a highbrow, having to read the classics. You can read anything and it's just about pure pleasure and enjoyment.
And then people literally swap the books, so people would take books away with them?
Yeah, at the end I call it the grab. All the books in the middle, and then people grab the books that they want. And quite a lot of people covet a same book, but then between them they share it throughout that month or when they finished it. And because people tend to bring, I'd say on average 2 to 3 books each, there's always something for people to take away and enjoy, and they might take more than one book, which is great. There's always something brilliant to take away.
It feels like a sort of trust exercise, that you trust people are going to bring things that they love and are good rather than things that they just want to get rid of. I mean, do you ever have any of that?
Oh no, I love it when people bring something they've loathed. I call it the Marmite reads. One person might love a book, another person might hate it, but you get that dynamic and that tension when people have that conversation. And that's actually what makes it really exciting and a really kind of fruitful book share, because different people like different things. And I've sat there, and others have, someone saying how much they really dislike a book, but it makes you actually want to read it because you're like, oh, I want to see whether I dislike it or I like it. So the Marmite reads are actually the most popular ones. And over the years, and for people that have been coming quite a long time, and there are some people that have been coming for the full 7 years, we see the books come back, and new people that have joined Bookshare are reading it, and it reminds us what we liked or loathed about that book. So you can see these life cycles and other people enjoying it. So it's really quite fascinating.
Have there been any books that have particularly stuck out in your mind, like any discoveries that you've made?
For me, I suppose science fiction. I never thought I'd read science fiction, but actually quite enjoyed it. It has to have a kind of like dystopian universe element to it for me, but also non-fiction books, I think, as well. So like I mentioned about the Norwegian wood book, in my mind it was always around fiction, but that's the beauty of it. People bring whatever they want. And in that particular Bookshare, we had one of our long-standing booksharers, a lovely gentleman, older gentleman, and then a new booksharer who was in his 20s. And you just saw them connect across the room because they both had read this book and both really connected with it. And that's something that I find quite wonderful about Bookshare, is the intergenerationality of it, and all different kinds of people from all different walks of life. And that reflects in the reading. And so I've read things that I never would have thought I would read. Cosy crime I've got into, so a bit like Agatha Christie's and things like that. But there are also some more contemporary authors or classics. So there was a book, Stoner, that was very popular a few years ago. Vintage Books did a very good marketing campaign. And I think it was one of the World Book Night books. And a lot of us read it. And that was quite divisive. And it was a novel that I never would have picked up and read, about a man who he has quite an ordinary life, but it was really compelling. So if that hadn't come to Bookshare, I wouldn't have read it, but it's still a book that I think about now, and we still talk about it at Bookshare, even though we all read it about 5-6 years ago, which is quite phenomenal, really.
And where do you see the future? How do you see it evolving?
What I'd really like to do, and I'm in conversations with a friend of mine, is take Bookshare into schools. So with some of their year 5, year 6 pupils. And I think it's a great way also to help build children's facilitation and presentation skills, confidence skills, as well as get them into reading more and reading for pleasure, and not because it's part of a curriculum or because they need to pass exams. Actually, it's an enjoyable hobby and activity. And also I'd like to take Bookshare in some form to older people. So those people potentially in residential homes that can't get out as much, can't access libraries as much, and whether that's reading to them or just taking them a collection of books. So there are other ways that I really want to work with the community and really get reading for pleasure out there. And also I've been entertaining the idea of doing my own podcast for Bookshare. One of my friends lives in Devon. There's lots of people that can't make an event over in Margate, but they want to share in the excitement and discover new reads. So there's finding a way to capture that so we can spread the word a bit wider.
That sounds great. I think that would be one of my new favourite shows. And you've got a little stack of books there. Were some of those ones that came home with you from Bookshare?
Yeah, absolutely. So book I'm reading at the moment, I'm going to talk about at our next Bookshare, is Toni Morrison's God Help the Child. So this came to Bookshare. It's quite a short book for Toni Morrison. It was sat on my Bookshare pile And I've chosen to read it because obviously she died recently, and I thought it was a real opportune moment to really read her again. I've read Beloved and found that a really powerful, moving book. And I know she's an incredible writer, but I'd never heard of this book. So that's an instance where I wouldn't have known the other books that she's written. And sometimes authors' kind of most acclaimed works are the ones that you hear about. But the great thing about Bookshare is that you discover reads by authors that you don't necessarily know about, heard about. And I'm 2/3 of the way through, and it's absolutely staggering. It's just brilliant, and I'm romping through it. So I'm really grateful to our Bookshare for bringing that in. I've also got a wonderful looking book. It's got an incredibly kind of vintage cover. It's called Having Wonderful Crime by Craig Rice, and one of our Booksharers brought it in. She's actually a cosy crime author herself.
I didn't know about this genre, cosy crime. This is new to me, or is it a phrase that you've coined?
Oh, it's a phrase that my lovely Booksharer who writes cosy crime has told me about, but it is actually very in vogue at the moment in publishing. So it's your Agatha Christie's, it's your crime that isn't too gruesome. I love Poirot. It's a bit like a hug on a Sunday when you're cooking your roast dinner and you put a bit of Poirot on. That's what these books evoke. So it's kind of a more comfortable read, although a whodunit. And because she's a cosy crime author, the wonderful thing is she's bringing to Bookshare all these different detective novels that none of us have heard about. And so this one is Having Wonderful Crime by Craig Rice, which we hadn't heard of. I haven't yet read it, but it was published in 1944. And it's just one of those fantastic looking books that's kind of very well read, devoured, loved, incredible cover. And so I'm looking forward to reading that. And then the next book I've got is by Charlotte Runcie, Salt on Your Tongue, Women and the Sea. Living by the sea myself, being a woman, I really wanted to read this non-fiction book all about the power of living by the sea. And I actually got this from the Margate Bookshop, a brand new book, hardback, which I rarely buy. I can't wait to get stuck in and see what resonates with me, combining my two favourite things, books and the sea.
It is the perfect contrast, isn't it? This wonderful old... There's something about old books, and they kind of have this slightly yellowed pages and the kind of, you know... And then there's something about a beautiful brand new hardback, and again there's a kind of different smell, but it's equally kind of intoxicating. I love the sense that at your Bookshares you're going in and you're surrounded by books and all of this inspiration, and then you can take these different things home with you. It just sounds so wonderful.
Yeah, and I think something that I really value and treasure with Bookshare is no one just takes home a book. They take away new friends as well and a new experience. And I can't emphasise that enough. My Booksharers have been an absolute joy over the last 7 years. And I actually started Bookshare in 2012 when I was going through quite a dark period in my life, was quite down, and I needed some light. Lots of people say, wow, I wouldn't have started a book club if I was feeling a bit down. But I suppose I didn't think of it that much. And I just wanted to meet new people, make new friends. And they don't really know, but they've provided such joy over the last 7 years. And I know between them, I've seen friendships blossom, whether it's just for that couple of hours on a Sunday when we meet, or whether it's in between and they meet up for coffees and go cycling together, do different things together. It's really wonderful. And there's been a lot of people that have come to Bookshare over the years. And through the joy of reading, it's enabled other things. And I think that's the point for me, is that reading and books are the starting point, but you can get so much from it. And whether that's talking about lots of different things in life, what's going on, connecting in different ways. I've seen people that on the surface you might think wouldn't necessarily get on, bond over books and have a really, truly wonderful, valuable friendship. And I think it's not just about the books, it's about the experience and the friends that you make along the way.
Wilby, thank you so much for telling me about it. It's been an absolute delight, and may it flourish for many years in the future.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode. A quick recap of those book club suggestions. Be mentioned Norwegian Wood by Lars Mytting, Stoner by John Williams, God Help the Child by Toni Morrison, Having a Wonderful Crime by Craig Rice, and Salt on Your Tongue by Charlotte Runcie. Bees Bookshare meets every other month. Visit beesbookshare.co.uk for the latest event details and news. On our next book club show, we'll be discussing Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, a retelling of the Iliad from the point of view of Briseis, a captured Trojan princess. It's the latest book read by my book club. It received rave reviews from critics and was shortlisted for the 2019 Women's Prize for Fiction. But never mind the critical acclaim, what did my book club make of it? Listen in to find out. And if you missed it, do check out our most recent episode on Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, a riveting exposé of Elizabeth Holmes and her biotech startup company Theranos. A non-fiction masterpiece? Or a 3-star book about a 4-star story? As someone in my book club memorably commented, have you read it? What did you think? Listen in and join our debate. That episode is there waiting for you on our iTunes feed. If you'd like to see what we're up to between episodes, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Book Club Review Podcast, on Twitter at Book Club RVW Pod, or email thebookclubreview@gmail.com. If you like what we do, please take a moment to rate, review and subscribe to us on iTunes. It helps other listeners find us and means you'll never miss an episode. But for now, thanks for listening and happy reading.